This, ladies and gentlemen, is the OneXPlayer Mini 6800U edition. It's a pretty powerful device. Now, I reviewed a device like this a couple months back when I checked out this device right here. This is the Gundam edition of the OneXPlayer Mini, featuring the Iris Xe graphics with an Intel Core i7 CPU. This is a more powerful variant featuring an AMD Ryzen CPU and a Radeon 680M GPU. It's also got 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5 RAM, which can be upgraded to 32 gigabytes, and it comes with 512 gigabytes of SSD NVMe storage, though that can be upgraded up to 2 terabytes at a cost. You can see the dimensions of this device are not too different from the other device I reviewed. It's basically the same dimensions, 10 1/4 inches wide, 4 1/8 inches tall, and then thickness-wise, at the thickest point it's 1.5 inches thick, at the thinnest point it's 7/8 inches. Same difference here, pretty much the exact same form factor, not too much has changed there. Like the previous device, it's super comfortable in the hands. I love these analog sticks and how smooth they are to rotate. They are not quite as full-fledged as, like an Xbox or DualSense controller analog stick, but definitely more range of motion than Nintendo Switch's Joy-Cons. Now, what's cool about these joysticks is that these are Hall effect joysticks. This technology makes it so that you don't have to worry about joystick drift with this device. That's just not a factor with these joysticks. The D-pad is nice and sort of somewhere between clicky and mushy. It's just a really nice balance and it feels really comfortable to press. ABXY buttons have a nice click to them, nice amount of resistance, not too much travel, not too little travel. Honestly, pretty perfectly balanced. The shoulder buttons click really nicely, and they don't have a whole lot of springiness, so it's this instantaneous click that makes this really responsive, and the triggers feel really awesome. Super smooth. I love the sound that they make. They remind me of GameCube controller. So inputs are still as excellent as ever. Start and select, nice and clicky. You got the power button up here, volume rockers, and you've got these 3 buttons right here, which are specialized for this device. Turning on the device, you'll notice these LEDs that were not there in the older version of the OneXPlayer Mini. The OneXPlayer Mini Pro has added these LEDs on the sides for those who want to go full gamer mode. The functionality of these 3 buttons have not changed, so this orange button takes you to desktop, and if you hold it down, you can bring up Xbox features like gameplay capture and stuff like that, so that's what that looks like. And then pressing this button brings up the keyboard, and then you've got this button, which is a nice little addition from the previous OneXPlayer Mini that I tried. It's this Game Center overlay, essentially, where you can modify a bunch of things from the performance, the wattage that the device utilizes, the GPU frequency. You can modify the fan speed. It's currently set to automatic. You can modify the rumble's vibration settings. I've kind of turned it all the way down. The rumble in this isn't super substantial. And then you got an option here where you can select the resolution of the screen, and you can even modify the LED effect. So let's go for this cyberpunky effect. You can see the LED changes to something more blue and purple, and there are a variety of customization options for that to set however you wish. The brightness can be set here as well, and I can use the touchscreen to make it brighter or dimmer. And you've got volume here as well, which can adjust right from this menu. So this right here is super convenient and makes the device sort of more in line with Steam Deck, which has that overlay that allows you to modify similar things. Now, if you have a full screen app open, then this will minimize that app. It's not like a true overlay, but overall, this menu right here makes a huge difference, super useful, and allows you to modify the power that the device uses so you can maximize its battery life and all these things. Just a great option for those who like to customize their playtime experience. I'm going to put the device back to sleep so I can show you the ports here. You've got USB-C at the bottom and USB-C at the top. The one thing that really baffles me about this device, that continues to be the crux of it, is the fact that it does not come with a micro SD card slot anywhere. So I have to rely on this dongle, which takes up a USB-A slot, and it's just portability-wise less convenient because I have to carry this extra thing around, which I could lose, and it's sticking out like this. So in order for me to put it in a case, I have to take this off and plug these off. And it's just, if it had that micro SD card slot, I would be able to forego this inconvenience. but the fact that it doesn't for a device like this still kills me. I wish they would have added a micro SD card slot over, the LEDs, which are cool, but the functionality of the micro SD card, that's far more important for a portable PC gaming device like this. That's really the biggest flaw of this device. But that qualm aside, everything about the hardware really does feel premium. It is plastic, but it feels like premium plastic, really dense, really rigid, and just a really nice device to hold. It also does come with gyroscopes, but it's kind of a pain in the ass to set up compared to how easy it is on the Steam Deck to get gyros going, so I don't really use it all that much. Hopefully we'll have a better solution in the future through drivers that just support gyros better for games. And one last thing I forgot to mention is the 3.5mm headphone jack right here, which will allow you to plug in your wired headphones. Always nice to have that option. Also returning to the Mini Pro are these grips back here that just makes it so easy to wield this device. It's just enough friction for your fingers to wrap around so that you can really feel like you're holding the device. It feels secure, and that way, no matter what position you're in, it feels like you just got a nice hold of it and it doesn't feel like it's going to slip out of your hands. As for the screen, it's 7 inches diagonal. It is a touchscreen IPS display. Fortunately, my device here doesn't have a whole lot of backlight bleed at all. Barely noticeable, if any, really. Though that's no guarantee with IPS displays, it can be inconsistent. I do wish they would upgrade to OLED just to get better colors and to avoid the potential of backlight bleed, but the device that I got here, the screen's still pretty good enough for its purposes, but OLED would be better. It's got a max resolution of 1900 by 1200. This is a 16 by 10 display. I think that's overkill. I leave the device at 1680 by 1050 resolution. That's kind of the maximum I go with games, and with obviously higher graphics fidelity titles, I'm going to reduce that resolution down to 1440 by 900 or 1280 by 800. I also want to talk about the speakers on this device. For the longest time, I felt like the speakers were kind of meh, kind of weak and thin sounding, but turns out that if you download a specific piece of software that can boost the volume and the bass and all these things, you can get pretty good sound out of this device. So this is what the device sounds like in its default state. I'm going to play this God of War trailer.
Everyone keeps secrets.
So let me pause the video for a second there and show you what happens when I download this FX Sound software and turn on my custom settings.
It's the only way to protect the ones we love.
And then let me turn it off.
I know you. God killer.
And then turn it back on.
What is it you want from me?
So here's another example. This is Cyberpunk 2077, and the music's blaring right now, and the speakers sound fine with FX Sound off, but you can see that the second I turn FX Sound on, yeah, it just makes a huge difference. I had a lot of trouble being able to hear from certain games that have sort of lower volume profiles, but once I installed this FX Sound program and essentially set the movie setting and boosted the bass a little bit, and then turned this thing on, the sound was just like, more than adequate, like pretty freaking good. The device feels like it actually has decent to good speakers. It's just the drivers suck or something, but once you install this booster, it's like it actually brings out the maximum potential of the speakers, and when that happens, I'm like, damn, these speakers actually can put some work in. Now, what many of you will want to know is, how does this device perform? Damn, for a device of this size, which is essentially about as wide as a Nintendo Switch, obviously significantly thicker than a Switch, but about as wide as one and relatively, equally portable if you don't mind the extra thickness. Man, it packs a lot of power, and I was thoroughly impressed by the performance of the 6800U and 68M chipset combination. It goes without saying that less graphics-intensive indie games or even older games like Arkham Origins and games of that generation just run perfectly on this device, even at high resolutions and at high to max settings. So I'm not going to focus too much on those. I'm going to cover more modern games. Let's start with Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, which I ran at high settings, And not only did I run it at high settings, the resolution I set to 1680 by 1050, and I was getting 60 frames per second without breaking a sweat at high settings. I mean, damn, talk about portable ops. Witcher 3 I ran at high settings, and even at an increased resolution of 1400 by 900, I was getting 50 to 55 frames per second average. And if I lower the resolution to 1280 by 800, I mean, I can hit 60 FPS easily at high settings. Control, I set to low settings. This is a more graphics-intensive game. But at 1280 by 800 resolution, I was still getting a great 50 to 60 frames per second average. Pretty smooth overall. There are some dips that go into the 40s when there are a lot of enemies around and a lot of effects going on. But when things are quiet, I mean, this game can run at 60 FPS or above even on this device at 1280 by 800 resolution. And I can even boost the resolution up to 1440 by 900 and still get a 40 to 50 FPS average. Still very playable frame rates, and things just look a little bit sharper. Resident Evil 3 Remake is one of the more impressive looking titles, and at high settings with AMD FSR 1.0 on, at 1440 by 900 resolution, I was getting pretty much just smooth 60 FPS. Occasional dips into like 58 FPS, but you can hardly notice that dip. And, I mean, you can always go a resolution lower if you so desire, if you really want to keep the frame rate consistent. The game just runs beautifully on this device. Cyberpunk 2077, I was running at medium to high settings with AMD FSR 2.1 on, and at 1280 by 800 resolution, I was getting a really solid 30 to 45 frames per second average. The game was just very playable, and it looked really great on the smaller screen at these higher settings. Portable Cyberpunk 2077, playing just really beautifully overall. Elden Ring, I ran at medium to high settings and not at 1280 by 800 resolution. I actually bumped the resolution to 1440 by 900, and I was still getting between 35 to 45 frames per second, sort of 40 FPS average. This is at higher resolution than Steam Deck's native resolution of 1280 by 800, and it was running it at more than good enough frame rates for it to be playable. And obviously there's always the option to lower the resolution and tweak the settings so you can get even higher frames per second. Again, this device is just a thicker switch, and to be able to get that kind of performance on such a ultra portable device, again, the future's here, ladies and gentlemen. Last but not least, I played Marvel Spider-Man on this device on medium settings with AMD FSR 2.1 on. At 1280 by 800 resolution, I was getting 45 to 50 FPS average web slinging, which is when the game is at its most graphics intensive. And then when just kind of walking around the streets, I was getting 50 to 60 FPS average. And then indoors stuff, I mean, that just ran perfectly, 60 FPS all around. And the game just looks really great on the smaller screen at that resolution and at those graphic settings. The OneXPlayer Mini is also a beast when it comes to emulation. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about 3DS, PSP, GameCube, Wii, PS2, and Wii U emulation because, I mean, at this point, because of how powerful this device is, those emulators can run on this device incredibly well. The one that really tests devices is Switch emulation. For the OneXPlayer Mini, because it utilizes an AMD chip, Ryujinx was the best emulator option because it actually supports Vulkan, and things just ran beautifully on the emulator on this device. Mario Odyssey was running at a smooth 60 frames per second. Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, I ran at 40 to 60 frames per second with the 60 FPS mod. Astral Chain was running at a smooth, solid 30 FPS, even during those more graphics-intensive scenes and moments and sequences. This is just an awesome device for both PC, gaming, and emulation. The device also has really great thermals. I seldom felt the device getting warm in areas where my hands would touch the device, and even when it does get warm, it never gets super warm. And the fans are just this sort of low-pitch hum, so yes, you can hear the fans when, the fans ramp up during more graphics-intensive moments, but that's about what that sounds like, and it's sort of a unintrusive humming sound that disappears into the background, especially once you turn on the FX Sound software and start playing games through the speakers or put on some headphones. The fan noise becomes just a complete non-issue. So just fantastic thermals that leverages the thickness of this device. As for the battery life on this device, this has a 48 watt-hour battery inside, and if you utilize the maximum 28 watts that you can increase the device's power to, then it's going to last you about an hour. That's kind of the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, you can increase that by, an extra hour or two. You can get 2 to 3 hours if you lower the wattage, and if the game that you're playing isn't super graphics intensive, it's really going to depend, but on average, you're going to get 1 to 2 hours of battery life. With the battery bank that I have, I tend to get an average of 3 to 6 hours of intense AAA gaming. More if I turn down the wattage and I'm, emulating Game Boy games or just doing something much less graphics intensive. But battery life is not great on this thing, and it's probably the biggest obstacle that these portable PC gaming devices need to overcome. Now, obviously, the biggest competition that this device faces is the Steam Deck, and I do feel like we're starting to get to a point where the non-Steam Deck devices are progressively getting more powerful and are able to leverage high resolutions more and the like. But when it comes to value, that's where Steam Deck continues to be ahead of the curve. $650 is the maximum price of a Steam Deck, and that gets you the 512 gigabytes version. This OneXPlayer Mini with the 6800U chipset, you're going to be paying roughly twice as much as you need to pay for a Steam Deck. Let me actually bring up the prices for all of the models here. So you can get the 512 gigabytes of NVMe SSD storage plus 16 gigabytes of RAM version. That starts at $1,200. And then if you get the 32 gigabytes of RAM and 2 terabytes of NVMe SSD storage version, that goes all the way up to $1,550. I'd say the most comparable to the Steam Deck is the 16 gigs of RAM and the 512 gigabytes of internal storage version. That's, almost twice as much as the most expensive version of the Steam Deck. So yeah, the value of this device is hard to justify. It is powerful, and you can get high resolution PC gaming and emulation gaming. And, for those who spend the money, I do think they're going to be happy with this device. But if you can't afford to spend over $1,000 on a device like this, definitely just go for the Steam Deck. But if you happen to have the money to throw around and are looking for alternatives, this is not a bad alternative at all. Again, very comfortable to hold and just really portable, more portable than the Steam Deck, I'd say, in terms of its overall size. And what it can do for its size is actually still quite impressive. The microSD card really being the biggest qualm I have. The fact that it lacks a microSD card slot, and the fact that I have to carry this dongle around. And the fact that it runs Windows does mean that folks are just more used to that operating system and want just across-the-board compatibility when it comes to PC gaming. It's just going to be a lot more convenient to game on this operating system with this fairly powerful hardware. So this is still very solid. I gamed on this a lot in the past couple of days, and honestly, I wouldn't mind carrying this thing around because it is just such a small, albeit, kind of thick, but relatively small device, given that it is a PC gaming device that can run AAA games at not only 1280 by 800 resolution, but even higher in certain cases. It's pretty awesome, honestly, all things considered. The price being really the only major sticking point. So there you have it, folks. That's my review of the OneXPlayer Mini Pro 6800U version. I hope this video was informative for those who are maybe thinking about getting a device like this. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the array of devices like these out there, from the Steam Deck to the OneXPlayer Mini, among many others, and which one you tend to gravitate towards, be it because of features or because of the chipset that it uses or because of its price and value. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.